Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Silverman, Managing Partner of EB5 Thank you for taking time to join us on today's webinar. Today, we're going to chat about the new USCIS policy guidance on investment term for EB5 investors that just came out at the end of 2023. And we'll be talking about this from the developer's perspective. So for developers who are looking to raise EB5 capital for their projects, they'll need to become familiar with this new policy and how it will impact how EB5 capital can be structured to enter their project. So first, we'll spend a minute just talking about EB5 We're a leading EB5 investment fund manager. We've worked with thousands of investors over the last 10 plus years. This is a map showing many of our client countries over the years, more than 60 countries and counting. We're also the only EB5 regional center operator to cover all of the continental United States, so we can do new EB5 projects all over the country. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Sam Silverman, one of the two managing partners. My background and bio are there on the left-hand side of the screen, and my partner Mike Schoenfeld there on the right. Today we have the privilege of having Bruce Rossetto, a shareholder at Greenberg Traurig, a major law firm, with us, and I'll let Bruce jump in and introduce himself and share a little bit about Greenberg and their EB5 practice.
Thank you, Sam, and I appreciate the opportunity to present this to developers. I have been practicing for 42 years. Greenberg Traurig is an international law firm with about 45 offices and over 2,650 lawyers. My practice is really corporate securities and finance related. So I've been working on EB5 projects now for the last 15 years, and I have broad experience in securities work and corporate transactional work.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. Okay, so Bruce, can you tell us a little bit about this guidance and what it is and when it came out? And
I think that any developer now looking to utilize the EB5 program, they need to understand that there's been some major guidance changes. It really began on October 11th, 2023, when the USCIS published new guidance regarding the EB5, Reform and Integrity Act. Pursuant to that new guidance, EB5 investors who have invested their capital after March 2022 now have the ability to get their investment capital repaid after it's been invested in at risk for 2 years, provided that 10 jobs were also created during that time frame.
Got it. Yeah, that's really important.
You have the citation up there in case anybody wants to go to sleep reading all of the new rules.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, this is all this information is available on the USCIS website. In terms of the 2-year period, it's really going to be when money goes into the project. So from the NCE, the new commercial enterprise, and then is made available and goes into the JCE, or the job creating enterprise. So that's kind of the key for when this minimum 2-year window would start.
And we should point out that there is some question as to, the timing of when that money goes into the JCE and when the JCE begins to deploy that money into the project, because that's really when I think when the project is, the money is at risk, and we can start looking toward the counting of the 10 jobs that are needed. But we may need more guidance from USCIS on that point.
And what about investment duration? So 2 years is a minimum, but not the maximum. What is going to kind of define the maximum, or kind of the actual period it ends up being?
Right. So 2 years is the minimum. The rule does not talk about what a maximum is. The maximum is really governed by the needs of the developer, when they need the development capital, what their phases of development look like, whether there's a senior loan in place that might inhibit their ability to repay the EB5 lenders prior to the senior lender being paid. So, from a developer standpoint, they need to look at what their needs are in terms of the timing, and work with the NCE in terms of trying to put together a repayment package that's going to be competitive in the market. The developer has to realize that they're competing against many other EB-5 projects in the United States, and the investors are going to be able to pick and choose those that are going to provide, the least amount of risk and the maximum comfort, if you will, of getting repaid their capital. So there's going to be some balance between what the developer might like versus what might be marketable within the program itself.
Got it. Yep, it's really important to just understand that raising EB-5 capital is not happening in a vacuum. And so now that this new rule is out, which helps investors, get their funds back earlier generally, you've got to be aware of that and see, well, how are other projects going to address that? And, investors are going to be looking for projects that, have some way to, get their funds back, earlier than later. So job creation, we mentioned earlier briefly, one of the key requirements of the program is to successfully create 10 new jobs. And so the government's basically clarified that, yeah, you can't get your money back until you can demonstrate that you created the 10 new jobs, which is kind of the table stakes to get the conditional green card. So no surprise there. One thing that is important for developers to understand is a little bit of a history lesson. And so this new policy only affects investors who join projects after March of 2022. So for investors who invested in EB-5 projects before March of 22, their minimum investment period is tied to having the green card in their hand, whereas any new investors post March 22, those are the investors where this new policy change is going to apply to. So that's kind of just important from a historical perspective, not so much for new capital being raised, as that would all be subject to the new policy because it's all post March 22, but just important to understand that this rule was different in the past and is now being changed.
So one other point that I'd like to make before you move on, Sam, on that particular slide, is that for a developer that may already have a project that has pre-RIA investors in it and is now out there looking for post-RIA investors, they're going to probably need to talk to their corporate securities counsel in terms of looking at the offering documents and perhaps supplementing them to take account of this new sustainment period and the guidance that's being presented, and how, from a mechanical standpoint, it might impact repayment to pre-RIA investors versus post-RIA investors.
Right, exactly. So it's going to differ based on the time of the investment, what rules an investor is going to be subject to in terms of the duration of their capital at risk period. Okay, so let's get a little more specific. And so, putting on the hat of an attorney working with a developer, and Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've worked with many EB-5 projects and developers over the years, and so you have a pretty good grasp of what developers are sensitive about, what's important to them. And so when you're working with those developers who want to go out and tap the market for more flexible, lower cost EB-5 capital, what are some of the things that your developer clients should kind of be aware of now that this rule is out there?
So I would begin by saying that the developer needs to sort of put on a sales marketing hat when going out looking for EB-5 investors, especially with these new rules in place, because it's changed the landscape a bit. So the developer has to understand what the needs of the EB-5 investor is going to be, what their comfort level is, and predictably, as you would expect with any investor, they're going to be looking for projects that have lower risk. Perhaps the construction's already started, so we know that jobs are being created. They're going to be looking for shorter investment periods. Of course, they're going to be looking at potential returns, and ultimately they'll be looking at the historical experience that a particular developer has in the sector of the project they're developing, whether they've had EB-5 projects that have been successful in the past, have they repaid these EB-5 investors. Those are the sort of questions they should expect to be asked and then prepared to have answers for. They should try to develop a program that is going to make them, if you will, competitive with other EB5 projects being offered to investors throughout the United States. Otherwise, they could go through all of the rigmarole here to try to develop a program, and at the end of the day, find out that no investor's interested in providing capital for their project.
Yep, exactly. It is a dynamic market, so it's really important to work with someone like Bruce, who's got a really good sense of what's successfully being filled in the market and what's not, because you don't want to go through the headache expense of putting together a project and then just find that you're not close to the same terms that others are successfully raising capital at. So that is
whether
definitely
it's advisors like lawyers such as ourselves, or perhaps advisors like Sam's company, we can help develop for you a program that would make sense, and we think should be marketable when you go out to launch a particular offering.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Whenever you do an EB5 project, there's two main components. There's the project documents. So that's Bruce. That's the paperwork, loan agreement, partnership agreement, all those documents that are going to explain how the investment works, what the timeline is, returns, disclosures, all of that. And then there's the regional center license, which is what EB5AN does. We own a network of regional centers that covers the country, and we sponsor projects that meet our criteria and allow them to raise capital, at the terms that they've set forth in their material. So you've got to have both components to do it, and so it's really important to make sure that you've got both bases covered. Okay, so a few more disclosures that I'll let Bruce walk us through.
Right. So if it's a new project that we're working on, then obviously we're going to provide very detailed risk factors that take into account all of the new guidance that's being presented by USCIS. To the extent it's an existing project that's ongoing, but new investors are coming in, then you're going to probably want Securities Counsel to take a look at those risks and provide some additional new risks for EB5 investors to take a look at and understand. So among those could be, the timing of your project completion, understanding the repayment period and explaining the risks that are involved with that, making sure that the EB5 investor understands where we are from a job creation standpoint for that particular project, understanding, of course, that the USCIS may come back with new guidance that changes the landscape that we believe exists today. And that's really just the beginning of what we're going to look at in terms of the new risks. But the point for the developer is you just can't sit on your laurel and say, well, I already have an offering program that somebody looked at a year or two ago. The rules have changed, so those project program documents probably need to be updated, revised, and some additional transparency and risks are probably need to be explained to the investors if you're going to move forward with the new guidance.
Yep, exactly. It's always important to have the most current information because things are changing, on a regular basis, and investors are going to be, looking for the most favorable terms, the moment that they invest. So that is really important. So Bruce, can you share a little bit about how you work with developers and what that process looks like? Time to market, what they would need at a minimum if they were interested in exploring raising capital for their project, kind of all of that.
Yeah, so we work with developers extensively before we even begin to discuss what the offering documents are going to look like or what the terms of the offering are going to look like. We also sort of work with developers like we're the investor, so that we can prepare the developer for the type of concerns, what's in the market, what the expectations of investors are going to be, and then we try to understand, where they are in terms of their construction phases, how much mezzanine financing they might need from an EB5 investor. Do they have senior lending commitments in place? Do they have the equity in place? All of these things go together before we even turn a page on a document to make sure that we're on the same page with the developer. This is an expensive process. It's not an easy process, and we don't want to waste the time or the money of our clients if we don't think that the EB5 project is going to be suitable to them or suitable to the marketplace that the investors are looking for. So we spend a lot of time up front with each of our developers, and oftentimes we end up telling our developers, this is not the right form of alternative financing for you. Let's look at all the alternative financing methods. But if we think that it does fit their criteria, then we go, full force and get engaged really at that point to develop the program and the offering documents.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I put Bruce's contact information there on the right side, and we strongly recommend him. We've worked together for a number of years now, and it's definitely a good idea to have all the right people on the team. EB5 is complicated. There's a lot of different things to be aware of. And so, working with someone who's got a lot of experience, particularly with what the market is doing today, will save you a lot of headache and delay. So thank you again, Bruce, for taking the time to join us. We also, in conjunction with this webinar, we're also publishing an article, which is kind of all the key conclusions from today's webinar in a post. So look for that on our blog. And thank you again, Bruce, for taking time to join us.
Sam, thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me to participate.